Final step, let's put everything together, not everything from this unit only, but everything from all the units that we have done so far in this Introduction to Programming course. Okay, we are going to work with real data from Zhao Mountain. So first we are going to download that data. We are going to use this. We are not going to dwell in it too much, but basically we are using a tool called gdown, and then we are using this exclamation mark character to tell Python that we are using some external program inside of our Python code. Python is an extremely useful programming language that allows us to do many things. So here, using this, I have downloaded this CSV file, which I can open, and it has the following structure. I have a column called TA, that's just to indicate that this is about temperatures, and this first column has many dates from 2012 to well, this has many pages, but I think 2023. Okay. And I also have columns depending on the hour of the day, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and so on and so forth until 22, which was the time when the temperatures are recorded. And sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. Okay, in this case, having a 0 means that the temperature was 0 degrees Celsius, and not having anything means that, well, there's no recording for that particular date and time, and that happens at different places. Okay, all the columns have at least some entries. As we will see, some of them have very few of them. Okay, we can actually read. This file is a CSV file, so it has quite a lot of structure, so we could use a library to use it. For example, the pandas library. Okay, the pandas library is a very useful library to work with structured data, and it can read my files without much more fuss. Okay, I can just use a function called read CSV from this pandas library that I'm importing here, and I already get a very well structured type of object that I can use a lot. You have one extra notebook with a presentation of this pandas library in case you want to use it too, but pandas is not the goal of the current session. Okay, but still we will use it to see that we have 4,000 rows, okay, in this file, and that this structure is the same that the one that we can see in our hard drive. Okay, this is very convenient too, but remember, this part is not inside of Python. Python has no control over this, and it does have some control over this. But now what we are going to do is that we are going to manage this file by reading it with the functions for reading and writing in files that we have been seeing. Okay, so first let's start with the with open structure. We are going to open on our ira.csv file, and we are going to assign the file handle a name of f. Notice that we are using in this open, we are using the for to traverse all of the lines in my file as if they were in a data structure, and I'm printing all of them. Okay, one important thing is that I'm printing all of them using this end equals blank space equals empty string. Okay, why am I doing that? Well, remember, let me tell you that the lines in my file all end up with a new line character. That's usually the case. Okay, so if I don't do that, when I print each of them in turn and I run my code, I am going to have my line and then one extra line change character, because print adds one and the line already had one. So this is the line which changes line, and then print also prints one extra new line character, which I don't want him to do. I don't want Python to do. So I'm telling Python, now you end the print without a new line character. The end is nothing. It's an empty string. Okay, so this is a trick so that I don't get all of those empty characters in between, empty lines in between. Now here we can see the output. I'm just printing all of my lines, okay? And you can see that we have two sliders here. One of them is to slide on the notebook, and I can slide on the notebook if I'm outside of the cell, or if I click inside of the cell, I can also slide the data, okay? Sorry, here. And I can see all of the data. Sometimes it's easy to just get here and I want to move. So if you want to move, you either get to the end of the data or you just come outside and print. Sometimes when you're here it's a little bit difficult, but usually to the side you go out of the cell. Okay, so we have printed all the lines in all the 4,000 lines in our temperature file. We can see that each line contains the date as if it was supposed, and then it also contains 17 fields. And these fields that we saw before as properly separated here with this interpreter that Google Colab is showing us, or we saw the same thing in Pandas, actually are separated by commas. Okay, each line is actually a text line separated by a comma. Sometimes positions don't contain anything, and then I have several commas, one after the other. Okay, so that's the structure of the file that we have. And now what we want to do is to compute the minimum values of the temperatures recorded at 7 o'clock. If I go to the start of the file, I will see that the temperatures, that the 7 o'clock column is, let me slide the cell up to the first one. The 7 o'clock column is the second column in the file, the column in position 1. This is position 0, this is position 1. So these temperatures here are the temperatures at 7 o'clock. So I'm going to need to find the minimum value here. So I want to traverse, to visit all of the values in this position for every line and record which one is the minimum. We have already seen how to check the minimum of a file. I just need to do something to find the minimum. Okay, I need to compare to traverse all of the elements, and then every time check if my element is smaller than the minimum that I already have, and if it is, update my minimum variable. So I will do that by declaring a minimum value with a value that's way beyond what is reasonable, what is possible for Celsius temperatures, 9,999. Then I'm going to open the file as we have been seeing and process each line. Notice that here I have one quick thing that's called next. Okay, this next thing is to jump the first line of the file that contained the column names. Okay, so when I want to, in a file, once I have a file handle jump one line, I use next one time. Open the file, jump one line, and then for the rest of the lines, I need to do something. Okay, what something do I need to do? First, I need to read from every line position number 1. Okay, the second position, the position with index 1. In order to do this, we will use a Python built-in function called split. You give a character or a substring, this could be more than one character, to Python, and it breaks down one string every time it finds the character or the string of characters that you have given to it. So for example, in this case, when I run this, I tell Python to split this string every time it finds a comma. So it returns a data structure, a list actually, with what's in each what's between each comma in one position. Okay? And then we can access the elements here just by making a reference to the index. This is like we saw with the strings. So this is the element from the list number 0. This is the element from the list number 1. We have a whole unit on list, but you only need this for now. Okay? And now we are almost ready, but we need to be a little bit careful with our variable types. So for example, now if I do for each string split separator of 1, I will get the position that I want. I will get this 4.2. But if then and I can store it in a variable called element. But if I then want to use it as a number, like for example, check if it's negative or positive, like we already saw in the if unit, I will get an error because Python is telling me the comparison operator is not supported between string and int. Why is this happening? This is a number. Why are you complaining about strings? Well, when we are reading from files, everything is treated like a string, even if it contains a number. So we have to tell Python explicitly that this thing contains a float value, a real value. So to do that, we use this syntax. You give me this string and you transform into a float value, and then we can run the code. Okay? What did we do? First, we had a code to just traverse all the lines. Before we had printed them, here we are not printing them. And for each line, what can we do? We can use the split function to get the position that we want, and then that position we transform it to float format, so we don't have problems then operating it and using it as a real number with this float function. Let's put all of that together here. I have my min variable, and then I open my file with open file as f. I jump the first one, the first line that contains the names of the columns with next. And then for every line, first I split it in the commas. So I have a list with the things that are between the commas. I take the first position, line divided of 1. Okay? If that's not empty, this is a bit of a thing that we have to add. If it's not empty, then we do what we were doing. We transform it to float and then compare it to the minimum. Okay? Forget about this part for a second. So we are reading this line divided thing and we are transforming it to float, its first position. And then we are checking if that's smaller than the minimum. If that's smaller than the minimum, then I update the minimum. Okay? And what we are doing here is just checking the case when actually what I have in my line is one of these cases when there is no data, when everything is empty, okay, that we had seen before in the printing. If I have one of these in my first column, if I have an empty position, then I should not be trying to transform that into a float, because that's not a float, that's nothing. Okay, so to avoid that case, I need even one more if. If this line divided of 1 is not an empty string, then do everything that we want to do. Transform it to float and compare it to the minimum. And if it's actually an empty string, you don't need to do anything. We just completely ignore this. We run this and we get minus 20.3. To finish this example, we will make all of this a little bit more compact using a Python function. Okay, we will define it here with the def reserved word. We will give it a name, 7 o'clock update, and then we need 2 parameters, s and the minimum so far, because we will call this function for every line in the file. So we want to know what the minimum so far was. and we do the same thing that we were doing before. We split, just as before. This value becomes the split of the string S that we are receiving. Okay, before it was line split, now we are calling this S. So we are splitting it here, taking the first value. If this value is not an empty string, or the float of this value is smaller than minimum, you just return the same minimum that we had. Else, if this is not an empty string and the minimum is smaller than the minimum is so far, we return this value now as the minimum. Okay? This is a very nice compact code that does exactly the same thing as before, but shorter, and uses many of the things that we have learned. It uses this float to transform variables from one type to another. It uses OR, and it's important that this OR is short-circuited, because we don't want to be doing conversions to a value that's a string. So because of that, first we check this. If val is an empty string, then we will now check this and jump there and directly to the return, because we will know that this is true. Okay, but if this is false and then this is true, we will also end up with here. And if this is false and this is false, then we will go to the else and update the minimum. And then we will call this with the rest of the code, with open air file as a file handler F, jump the first line with N, and then for every line the processing is done, all of it with the function. Don't worry if this example is a little bit overwhelming. If you can really understand this example and if you can adapt this code to do what you want to do, you have achieved the objectives in the course. If you can't, don't worry, think about it. Go back to the parts that are not clear. Ask me, ask a friend, Google it, okay? One thing that I do not recommend that you do is that you ask ChatGPT about this, okay? I asked ChatGPT to solve one very similar type of exercise, and it messed up. ChatGPT and generally coding aids can help with some things, but sometimes they also mess up. Let's say the first version, it mainly did well. It had some small problems, but as I asked it to be a little bit more precise and to do the code a little bit more compact, ChatGPT ended up providing an answer, as it always does, and the answer was wrong. Okay, at this point you're learning to code. Do not trust ChatGPT or coding aids at this point. They will give you wrong answers and you will not be able to tell the difference. That's one danger. Another danger is they will give you right answers and you will not learn how to do this for yourselves. Okay, if you can only do the code that the AI editor help does, then there is no point in hiring you for anything. Okay, coding aids, AI coding aids can be helpful in some circumstances. At this point in your development, I heartily recommend that you do not use them. Okay, so go back, think, do the work, ask for help if you need it. Okay, and this mostly concludes the course in basic Python programming. You will see that you have some extra units if you want to check them out too.